In tonight's news edition, Iran and world powers reach a framework agreement on curbing Iran's nuclear program, allowing further negotiations towards a final agreement. Yemen's Houthi fighters and their allies capture a central district of Aden, despite ongoing Saudi-led airstrikes to stop the rebels' advance. And at least 147 people are killed during the storming by militants of a university campus in Kenya. Good evening and very warm welcome to the news. Jordan's ambassador to the United Nations, Dina Qawar, said the Palestinian issue, combating terrorism, the Syrian crisis, as well as Yemen, Libya and Iraq, will top the Security Council's agenda after Jordan took over the Council's rotating presidency for the month of April. Qawar told ambassadors of Security Council member states that the Palestinian issue, which Jordan sees as the crux of the conflict in the region, will be a key agenda priority during the kingdom's tenure for this month. She added that the fight against terrorism and extremism will also be a dominant issue. Jordan will today preside over closed-door consultations by the Council's ambassadors, during which it will officially submit its action plan. Iran and world powers have reached a framework on curbing Iran's nuclear program at marathon talks in Switzerland. That will allow further negotiations towards a final agreement. US President Barack Obama said Iran will not develop weapons-grade uranium. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani said key parameters had been agreed in Tehran's nuclear talks with major powers. A post on his Twitter account said that drafting of an agreement would start immediately and would end by a June 30th deadline. A Western official said that agreement would include limits on Iran's enrichment of uranium for 10 years. Western and Iranian officials at the talks said they would conclude with a joint statement announcing that enough progress had been reached to allow further negotiations until a final deadline of June the 30th. Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif also confirmed that 8 days of negotiations in Switzerland, that solutions had been found with the 6 major powers.
The agreement is supposed to come on June 30th if we are all working well and very lucky. So what we expect today is a statement and the fact that we have all reached common understanding on how to resolve the issues. But the agreement, a written agreement, is something that needs to be drafted by all participants and agreed upon in a multilateral process, and that would take hopefully 3 months to finalize, and hopefully less.
But have you reached understandings on all of the issues that you thought of? There's still some that haven't been solved
That's
yet.
what we think we have, but nothing is agreed until everything is agreed.
Over to Yemen, where Houthi fighters and their allies seized the presidential palace and a central district of the city of Aden as the Saudi-led coalition launched an 8-day of airstrikes to stop the rebel advances. Hours after the Houthis took over Aden's central neighborhood, unidentified armed men arrived by sea in an area of the port city which Iran-allied Houthis have yet to reach. A Yemeni official denied that ground troops had landed in Aden, and a port official said they were armed guards who had disembarked from a Chinese ship trying to bring aid or evacuate civilians. The southern port city has been the last major holdout of fighters loyal to President Abdrabbu Mansour Hadi, who fled Aden a week ago. Residents of Aden's central district said Houthi fighters and their allies had deployed foot patrols through its empty streets after heavy fighting in the morning. As the conflict in Yemen goes on, Pakistani Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif called for a joint session of parliament to consider whether to join the Saudi-led military campaign against the Houthis. During a weekly news briefing in Islamabad, Foreign Office spokeswoman Tasneem Aslam confirmed that the issue would be discussed by parliament.
The matter has been referred to the Parliament, and on the 6th of April, the Parliament will meet. We have also condemned the actions by non-state actors to overthrow a legitimate government, and called upon all warring factions in Yemen to move to the dialogue, negotiating table, and resolve the matters through dialogue and political discussions.
Syrian rebels captured the main border crossing between Jordan and Syria. The rebels of the Nusra Front said they took control of the border crossing of Nasib in the southern Daraa region after 9 months of fighting with government forces. In Damascus, Daesh militants invaded the Palestinian refugee camp of Yarmouk on the southern fringes of the Syrian capital. Official sources said clashes erupted between the militants and Syrian opposition fighters inside the camp, with Daesh seizing control of large parts of it. Sources reported that at least 10 of the opposition fighters were killed and 3 doctors injured in the clash, causing the closure of the hospital in the camp. The Syrian government deployed additional forces around the camp, but not yet intervened into the clash. The United States and its coalition partners conducted 7 airstrikes in Iraq against Daesh militants since early yesterday. The combined joint task force that led the operations said 4 airstrikes in Iraq, approved by Iraq's military, struck near Beiji, Fallujah, Sinjar and Ramadi. In the city of Tikrit, Iraqi army and police commanders paraded through the streets of the key city a day after the Iraqi government claimed victory over Daesh militants there. Convoys of cars flying Iraqi flags drove through the city, along with tanks parked on the side of roads. Government officials said only a few pockets of insurgents remained in the city. Interior Minister Mohammed Al-Ghabban said security forces were fighting to clear the city's last Daesh foothold, the northern neighborhood of Qadisiyah. Ambushes by armed men in Egypt's northern Sinai Peninsula have killed at least 15 soldiers and 2 civilians. The attacks also wounded at least 19 other soldiers and several more civilians. The latest violence came as Egypt continues its battle against armed groups operating in the northern Sinai. Sources said gunmen opened fire on soldiers with automatic rifles and rocket-propelled grenades at 5 separate checkpoints throughout the region, including near Sheikh Zweid, east of the town of El Arish. Egyptian military reports also said at least 15 armed men were killed by the military forces during the attacks. Israeli Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon said a new Israeli air defense system developed in partnership with the United States will be deployed next year. He said after meeting U.S. House of Representatives Speaker John Boehner, the missile named David Sling is a mark of the continued vigor of the U.S.-Israeli alliance. The U.S. and Israel said the system has met all its objectives in a series of recent live interception tests. The system shot down targets simulating longer-range missiles like Scuds. Ya'alon thanked Washington for funding the missile's Shield's development.
This week it has been demonstrated with successful tests of the new David Sling system, which is a joint venture, American-Israeli project, which is successful, and we believe that next year it's going to be operational.
At least 147 people were killed and dozens more wounded when gunmen of a Shabab militant group stormed a Kenyan university campus, taking people hostage and engaging security forces in a shootout. Scores of students were wounded after the attack on the university in the northeastern town of Garissa. The Interior Ministry said that Kenyan security services killed 4 gunmen and the siege was almost over. It said 500 students were unaccounted for. But 2 hours later, a Shabab militant said they were still holding hostages. Here's more on the pre-dawn attack.
Kenyans watch as emergency crews rush to a college in Garissa near the border with Somalia. At least 14 people were killed and at least 65 more wounded after al-Shabaab militants stormed a university campus there and started shooting indiscriminately. A spokesman for the Islamists told Reuters they released Muslim students and kept Christian students hostage, and that fighting with security forces continued inside the compound for hours. Students described a chaotic scene in the early moments of the pre-dawn raid.
As you can see, the situation we are in here, I've even run naked because we were not even given time to know what is happening.
We had some gunshot and we were sleeping, so it was around 5, and guys started jumping up and down, running for their lives. But it's unfortunate that where they were going to is where the gunshots were coming from.
Al-Shabaab wants to impose its own harsh variant of Sharia law in the region. It was behind the deadly attack on a Nairobi shopping mall in 2013. The group says it's punishing Kenya for sending troops into neighboring Somalia to fight alongside African Union peacekeepers. Kenyan emergency officials say close to 300 of the campus's 800 or so students were accounted for, but didn't say how many students remained trapped on campus where the gunmen were holding students hostage.
At least 17 people were killed and 50 injured when a suicide bomber blew himself up in the middle of a demonstration against corruption in Afghanistan's eastern province of Khost. The explosion struck close to provincial officials, including one of the lawmakers who had helped organize the protest. There was no immediate claim of responsibility. A Khost police chief said the protest against corruption had been going on for days. In a separate attack in southern Helmand province, a district police chief was killed by a roadside bomb close to an outpost seized by Taliban insurgents. A Russian trawler sank in icy seas off Russia's far eastern Kamchatka Peninsula, killing at least 56 of the 132 crew. 63 people were rescued, but 13 were still unaccounted for, hours after the fishing vessel sank in the Sea of Okhotsk. The trawler sank so quickly that its captain, who drowned, did not manage to send a distress signal. It was not immediately clear why the 26-year-old ship had sunk, but a local official said the crew may have violated safety rules by overloading it, affecting its balance. The second black box data recorder from the site of last week's Germanwings plane crash has been found. Meantime, German state prosecutors said they believe the co-pilot who crashed the plane in the French Alps had searched on a computer for ways to commit suicide shortly before the crash, which killed 150 people. In a statement, prosecutors in Dusseldorf said the computer, which they had found in his house, also showed searches on cockpit doors and safety precautions. They said that the co-pilot, Andreas Lubitz, had looked for information on ways to commit suicide in computer searches that took place between March 16th and 23rd, one day before the crash. A major sandstorm continued to pound Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. The National Center of Meteorology and Seismology warned people to expect more strong wind loaded with sand, severely restricting visibility. Residents were advised to remain indoors. The sandstorm disrupted air traffic at airports in Dubai, with online flight data showing Abu Dhabi was also impacted by the bad weather. Many flights into Dubai from South Asia, Iran and the Gulf region were delayed or cancelled. Some people argue that the secret behind long age is the type of food people eat, but for others, the secret for longevity is kindness. The world's oldest person, 116-year-old Gertrude Weaver of Arkansas, believes that it is all about treating other people kindly. Born on July the 4th, 1898, Weaver lives at a care facility in Arkansas, where she exercises in her wheelchair 3 times a week and eats 3 meals a day at the facility's dining room. She's the world's oldest person, according to the Gerontology Research Group of Los Angeles. We begin with the English Premier League. Arsenal is set to face Liverpool at home on Saturday in a match that can define the aspirations of both teams to qualify for next season's Champions League. At a news conference, Arsene Wenger won praise on Liverpool legendary captain Steven Gerrard, who's suspended for the game against Liverpool, but could face Arsenal if both teams reach the final of the FA Cup. Arsenal are in third place on 60 points and could close the gap with leaders Chelsea to 4 if they beat the Merseyside opponents, who are 5th on 54 points. Third seed Andy Murray recovered from an early setback to beat Austrian Dominic Thiem 3-6, 6-4, 6-1 at the Miami Open. Murray's 501st career win was far from easy, as the 21-year-old Thiem, ranked 52nd in the world, used an impressive backhand and some entertaining tennis to take the first set. Murray forced the deciding set and took full control after earning a break at the end of a long fourth game to go up 3-1. He will next face Czech Thomas Berdych in the semi-finals. And 8th seed Berdych defeated Argentine Juan Moniaco 6-3, 6-4 in the quarter-final. Moniaco, backed by a large Argentine support, put up a strong fight in the second set until Berdych broke for a 5-4 lead. Now, the weather outlook. Chilly in most areas tonight with northwesterly to southwesterly light winds. A slight rise in temperature tomorrow will create fair conditions across the hilly areas where highs will hover around the low 20s. The Jordan Valley should expect warm weather and relatively hot at the Dead Sea, with a high of 31 degrees forecast there. Similar conditions are expected in the Port of Aqaba with northerly moderate winds and calm seas. Now, look at temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. To close our top stories once again, Iran and world powers reach a framework on curbing Iran's nuclear program, following further negotiations towards a final agreement. Yemen's Houthi fighters and their allies capture a central district of Aden, despite ongoing Saudi-led airstrikes to stop the rebels' advance. And at least 147 people are killed during the storming by militants of a university campus in Kenya. And that's the end of tonight's news. My name is Raad Luptouj. Thank you so much for your time. Have a good night.